Hello everybody, I'm the White Angel and I am a conservative. So, today I'm going to talk to you about why socialists must, and I mean must, be kept out of the government. They are way too fucking dangerous. And I'll explain why. But before I do, I'm going to talk to you all about McCarthyism. Now, if you're not familiar, McCarthyism was a kind of extrajudicial vilification of the socialists and of the communist bent. Any form of Marxism, really. It was pretty hideous, and it really did kind of give them a reason to complain and have a victim complex. We actually fed them when we fed McCarthyism. We derailed and ruined people's lives over these theological or ideological disagreements, I should say. And it really just kind of fed the flames of socialism. See, look at these horrible, evil capitalists persecuting us. You know? And maybe that's part of the reason why they're so popular today. Is because they have the memory of McCarthyism backing them up. We went way, way too hard on them. You know, and when you're too aggressive, it always backfires. That's how it happens. Naming someone on a list, the Organization for Un-American Activities, going out and ruining people by exposing them, accusing them of all manner of things. It was sort of a pre-satanic panic style, guilty until proven innocent sort of thing. It was absolute vilification down to its very core. And it hurt people, badly. Both the guilty and the innocent were utterly destroyed. And they can use that. They can use that to feed into their current narrative, even though they're probably going to try and do the exact same thing. Who knows? Maybe that'll feed a resurgence of conservative America. I can only hope. Now, here's primarily why socialism fails. It all comes down to centrality. The real definition of socialism, and this is what socialism is, people. Socialism is the public ownership of the means of production. That the means of production belongs to the worker and to the government. That is the meaning of socialism. Look it up in the dictionary. They have a modern, sophist definition, which you won't find anywhere except from them, which is purely owned by the worker, or that the worker owns the equipment, partial ownership of the equipment. That is new. That is very new. The actual definition is that the means of production belongs to, is owned by the public. It is publicly owned means of production, therefore by the government. You can look it up in the dictionary, you can look it up in Marx. They're trying to trick you again with the sophistry like they always do. Socialism is public ownership, and the problem with that is it places all the responsibility for the means of production and the managing of the marketplace, and puts all that responsibility onto the government, to the single payer. And therefore all it takes is one idiotic mistake and the whole thing falls apart. Decentralizing your economy, idiotic mistakes can be recovered from, and people can support each other. But when it's all one organization, i.e. the government, well, now you see why it fails. Take, for example, in Venezuela. I believe it was Hugo Chavez who was supposed to invest in their infrastructure and electricity. And instead, he invested it all into military power. And as a result, he made an insufficient funding into their electrical infrastructure, and that's why they now experience regular blackouts in Caracas. They never invested properly into electricity. Because there's only one payer, so there's no secondary payer to back them up when they make a mistake. There's no secondary or auxiliary option. See how that works? Now let's just say that socialism did succeed. It would still be bad, and here's why. Centrality. Socialism typically does not have voting or democracy of any form. Typically. And with the centrality of a single-payer system where the means of production are publicly owned, we see a situation where a tyrant or an authoritarian can get his hands on the ability to write the bills, to get his way into the halls of power. If I were a dictator wanting to step on people's backs, I wouldn't use capitalism, let alone democratic capitalism. No, I'd use socialism. Because socialism is more centralized. There's more power to be found all in one place. Easier to manipulate, easier to use. Capitalism is more decentralized and harder to manipulate for power. But when you're in a socialist system, boy, the opportunity to step on people's backs and just crush people and go around the court, it's insane. It's almost like Marx set it up that way on purpose. Just a thought. Now, here is where we're going to get a little controversial, as if we haven't gotten already. Is socialism being communism adjacent? Now, what does it mean to be a communism adjacent? Well, quite simply, what it means is that, politically speaking, on a spectrum, you are just a little bit north, a little bit south, or a little bit to the right or left of communism. You are really, really close to it. You're just a little bit shy. And here's how I'm going to make my case for socialism being communism adjacent. For one, they both hold the idea of there being a public ownership of the means of production. Second, the guy who created socialism, Karl Marx, with his book Das Kapital, co-authored the Communist Manifesto. He created both. They are both rooted in his philosophy. So of course socialism is communism adjacent. That's like saying the sky is blue or water makes things wet. Of course they're fucking adjacent. So now you see where we're at right now, with socialism becoming popular. Even Joseph Stalin said that socialism exists to set up communism. Supposedly, I don't know if that quote is accurate, it could be apocryphal, but who's to say that isn't true? It is absolutely communism adjacent. The only difference between socialism and communism is in socialism you have money and you have classes of people, but within communism you have a moneyless, classless society, or at least an attempt at a moneyless, classless society. It never works. No one has ever attempted communism and succeeded. And as for socialism, well, it's killed fucking millions. So yeah, it's a horrible attempt at trying to create a kind of workers' paradise that is neatly encapsulated under the classic philosophical phrase, a fool's paradise is a wise man's hell. That is exactly what that is. And who are the fools that want this paradise? AOC and Bernie Sanders. Who are they? Well, first and foremost, Bernie Sanders and AOC, they're liars. They're some of the biggest liars in the fucking world. Bernie is at least clever about it. First he says that millionaires and billionaires are the problem in our society, but then suddenly he stops saying millionaires and only says billionaires. Now why did that happen? Well, check out Bernie's net worth. I'm not going to show you the specific numbers right this second, but suffice to say it's a well-known fact that he did in fact become a millionaire at some point, and that's why he stopped saying millionaire. You know what, let's just look at Bernie's specific net worth right now. I want to see where he's at right now. Hold on. We'll go Bernie Sanders net worth. Oh, this ought to be good. Let's see this shit. $3 million with $174,000 salary. What do you know? That's why he stopped saying millionaire, because he fucking became one. Now imagine if he becomes a billionaire. Is he just going to stop? No, he'll probably find another way. He'll say rich people. But then, like, Bernie, you're a rich person. He'll be like, oh, well, you see, you know, all that bullshit. He also heaped on the Trump hate and was calling Trump a pathological liar. And I'm sitting there pulling my hair. I was like, Bernie, you're not a psychologist. Pathological lying is a specific psychological condition that requires a professional to diagnose. A professional you are not, Bernie. You're making a declaration that you should not be making. So you're a liar and you're a little bit nuts. You know what I'm saying? And he's always apologizing for the communists. He was apologizing for Cuba. He was apologizing for the ways they used to brainwash kids, calling it a literacy program. Yeah. Bernie's a piece of shit. And so's AOC. Because AOC's always promising free stuff for everyone. Yeah, there's no such thing as free stuff. Someone somewhere is paying for it. Maybe it's a peer-to-peer kind of thing. Who knows? But one of the worst things is she tried to claim that the border migrant facilities were quote-unquote concentration camps. And that rhetoric even led to a guy attacking a migrant center here in my home state of Washington. And he got killed doing it, and he was caught saying her rhetoric. What was funny is that she was crying and screaming in photographs in front of what she was claiming were the concentration camps, making it sound like it was a disaster. But then you get a wider view of the shot, and it turned out it was just an empty parking lot, and that she lied. Or she lied when she said that the rioters came for her, but they actually didn't. They were there for the politicians in the office, but she was in an entirely different building several miles away. AOC lies more often than many people change the oil in their car. And these are the two most popular socialists in government right now. Oh, dear God. Please, I ask the divine, save us from these lying idiots. Oh, say it ain't so, bro. But yeah, their biggest appeal is to social capitalists. Now, what is a social capitalist? A social capitalist is essentially a capitalist who likes to incorporate elements of socialism into society and into the marketplace and economics and so forth. This is not a bad thing, by the way. It has been demonstrated that mixed economies actually do work really well. And they keep everyone covered. They create nice social safety nets. The only serious problem with social capitalism is inflation. But the inflation can be managed. The only real serious issue here is that it's very high maintenance, which means you cannot afford to make a lot of serious mistakes. Which may be why we want to abandon Keynesianism, since it tends to fudge numbers and create inflation on its own anyway. Still, social capitalists have turned capitalism into kind of a bad word, and so they call themselves democratic socialists, but they're really just social capitalists. They don't even realize half the time that real hardcore socialism is the public ownership of the means of production. If you want the means of production to still be privately owned, guess what? You're actually a capitalist. That's literally the definition of capitalism. But this also goes forward to what I've often said is that socialists and social capitalists have great big ol' hearts, but teeny tiny brains. They're not very smart, they don't think, which is the biggest reason why they need to be kept out of the halls of power. They need to be kept out of government because of the danger they represent. They don't think. They're all about their feelings and not about the facts. They frequently ignore the facts. They rarely show any knowledge of economic theory whatsoever. Seriously, you can go on Twitter and debate one of these dorks, or watch videos or public press events and watch them answering basic economic questions, and they don't know jack shit. Seriously. I remember talking to one who was we were talking about capital investment to grow GDP, which is one of the main reasons of GDP. She insists that only government grows GDP through investment. She didn't want to accept the fact that the rich investing at the top of the system also grows GDP. She couldn't accept that because she was strictly anti-rich. She couldn't take it. The reality of it all was too much for her. Her heart was overpowering her brain. This is how these people are. Their hearts overpower their brains because they're teeny tiny and underpowered. They don't think, they're poorly educated. They're big, heartfelt dummies. They're Lenny from Of Mice and Men, essentially. This is also why they don't understand capitalism. Capitalism, they believe, according to the Marxist theory, that capitalism somehow comes in stages, and that it naturally is going to collapse eventually. There is no such thing as late-stage capitalism, which is what they call it. That is a mythological belief. Capitalism does not come in stages. It is a series of microprocesses adding up to one great big macro process. We call this simple economics. The microprocesses are mostly handled by the individuals engaged with them, and they mostly take care of themselves. Anytime you hand money off to, let's say, a taxi cab driver, that is one of the microprocesses that adds up to capitalism. It does not collapse. It continues along with the exchange of currency. But they didn't research capitalism from the angle of someone who actually understands it. They researched it through the angle of Marx, who either didn't understand capitalism himself or had an agenda to fulfill. Their knowledge on the nature of capitalism is totally incomplete. Capitalism is the only system in history which, other than some other forms of more proto-capitalism, like in ancient Rome or Babylon, which was not quite capitalism yet, but was the early stages of what would eventually become capitalism. It was more or less just an answer to the barter system. With the barter system, you had to give something up in order to gain something. You lost something in the deal. But with currency, an object which its nature is defined, that is the axis mundi of money, is solely the purpose of being traded. It serves no other purpose. Therefore, with money, you trade away money, you get what you wanted plus what you already had. You had what you have plus something else, thanks to money. This became the capital exchange and proto-capitalism that would later develop along with the theory of economics, which is what makes capitalism what it is primarily, along with the private ownership of the means of production. Capitalism has elevated people out of poverty time and time again because it is the most powerful system for increasing the overall value of the currency. When I have $1, hold on a second. This dollar has a set value, okay? This single dollar has a set value. This value is based upon how many things it can buy, by the number of products available on the market that the country produces. The production of the product, gross domestic product, what is made in the country and what is ultimately made purchasable by this. The further this goes, the more valuable it is. Its value is increased by the number of available domestic products and how many of them it can ultimately purchase. Due to the power of capital investment and the private ownership of the means of production, the value of this $1 has increased nearly 4 times the rate of what it would under other systems. And that's the system they choose to vilify. The system that turns this dollar into a powerful tool for purchasing toys like computers, food that you can eat, clothing you wear on your back, that many other socialist countries cannot afford on average. And that's the system they choose to vilify. So you see now why socialists are dangerous and should be kept out of the halls of power. They don't know any better. You can argue with them all day and they will never change their minds. They never change position. They are too dangerous. They should be kept out of the halls of power and they should be tested. All politicians should be tested. They should be tested for competency, literacy, political ideology, and knowledge. And only the people who pass these tests, the very excellent, should be the ones in charge. The socialists would never pass it. And good. They're big-hearted dummies. And they need to be guided by those of us who are smarter than they are. They need to take it for granted that we are smarter than them, because we are. We've shown it time and time again that we know our shit and they don't. So they need to listen to us. We can direct their hearts. The socialists can go work in charities. They can go work in soup kitchens. And they can make some real change, because that shit's easy to do. And even a big dummy knows how to do it. It's not that hard. The capitalists can be in the system, working the system, because we know how to make it work. Especially conservatives. And progressives can criticize us. They can point out things we need to change, and we can be reasonable and change those things. And then the socialists be kept out of the system entirely, and they can focus their ideology elsewhere. Anyway, that would be my proposal. That would be my society. That's my idea. Either way, you've seen the picture I've painted now. You know the facts. We need to be not so harsh on them. We need to treat them like people and not monsters, but at the same time, we need to keep them out of the halls of power. They are too dangerous. Anyway, there will be a link in the description below to my books on Kobo.com. Please buy, download, and read them. Thank you. And welcome to the revolution. Welcome to the Reformation. Yeah, there you go.